Here we go, episode 13 of Red versus Blue. My name is Mike Stark.
And I'm Keith Curry.
And we're back. Not much has happened in the mechanics of the election since we left, right, Keith?
No, we've had the Nevada primary, which is pretty much, and the caucus, which is pretty much a foregone conclusion that Trump was going to win that. Everybody is now queuing up for South Carolina on the 23rd of February, and then for the March 5th Super Tuesday primaries.
And then we're off to the races at that point.
It should be pretty much a cooked deal by that time.
Okay, so that's the mechanics of the election. Now, all of the distractions that go with each candidate. Biden remains old. That's a continuing story, right?
But he has a special counsel finding that he is old and feeble and can't remember anything. So It's been officially documented in the courts.
Yeah.
But the good news is he's not going to jail for documents.
Did you find that was a little weird that was in the report?
Well, look, that's what special counsels do. And the fact of it is that he's not being charged because they don't think that they can get a conviction based on mental capacity. I mean, that's a news story. And it reinforces just about everything that people think. That's what's news about it, is it reinforces what people already think. And the president certainly didn't help himself when he came out to his angry press conference to basically say, this is all nonsense. And then he forgot the word nonsense.
Right.
And a couple of national leaders and borders and that kind of thing.
Well, and it also keeps getting pointed out that Trump is not doing well in that area as well.
Well, he confused Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi, and he went after veterans again. So, yeah, I mean, it's a race to the bottom of mental cognizance, no doubt about it.
Exactly. All right. Where do we start today with everything that's going on?
Well, let's start with numbers. Let's start with how much Donald Trump owes based on various court judgments.
Yikes.
In his business fraud trial, he was fined $355 million, basically. With interest, people put that number up closer to $500 million. Once you also add in what he owes to E. Jean Carroll on two different judgments. He also chose not to seek immunity in the civil suit brought against him by some congresspeople and by D.C. police officers. So they're going to be able to depose him and sue him for damages related to January 6th. So he had a bad week in court, and he's owes now a lot of money. And I think it's beginning to finally sink into him in a way that he understands most acutely, that the courts are not going to be friendly, and that just standing on the front steps and raising hell about it is not going to be an effective defense strategy. So that's, I think, a very significant thing. And I hope it gives people pause to think about the distractions that are going to be on his mind as he tries to do this campaign from the defendant's table.
Now, that's a lot of money, but is he really going to have to pay it, or is he going to be able to drag this out forever?
Well, he's going to appeal it, but if he's going to appeal it, he's got to either post cash or he's got to post a bond. And if he posts a bond, he's going to pay interest. So the bill is going to run the meter runs pretty steeply in that situation. Gotcha. And it's not clear. I mean, what we're seeing now is that the judges, just like the appeals court did that denied him immunity, just like the judge did in the case in New York with the business fraud, are taking their time to write opinions that are pretty much appeal proof. And I think he's going to have a very difficult time appealing them. And, he may reduce the judgment somewhat, but he's not going to vacate the judgment. And that's going to be really wearing on him.
Now, to me, the bigger problem for him is not being able to do business anymore in New York. That would seem to be a bigger problem than even the money, which he can drag out, right?
Well, right, because that's where most of his business is. And the court appointed we'll call it a babysitter, to oversee the business, and they've already that judge, former retired federal judge, has already found significant problems in accounting and business practices and in the firm. They're going to make them have a compliance officer, which will be a new experience for the Trump organization, which basically doesn't believe there's such a thing as compliance, and that's going to just it's going to force him to do business in a way that he's never done it before.
Right,
honestly.
Now, we haven't even gotten to the criminal trials yet, right?
Right. And that's now, we now have a court date. So on the 25th of March, he's going to start jury selection in the Stormy Daniels hush money case with Michael Cohen in a New York courthouse with a New York jury pool And that's beginning to get to him, too. He's not been granted immunity. He's not been granted any kind of delay. So that's going to happen. And as soon as the Supreme Court rules on his immunity issue, and I think what they're going to do is they're going to uphold the Court of Appeals and not review the case.
Right.
Then that case, the January 6th case, tees up right after the hush money Stormy Daniels stripper case.
The Stormy Daniels case isn't even the worst. The worst is yet to come. As you mentioned, the January 6th thing and all of the other stuff is still, in the queue, as they say. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he maneuvers the campaign through all of this crazy stuff.
Yeah, it is. But I think it's going to catch up with him because after Stormy Daniels, you've got January 6th, then you've got the documents case, then you've got Georgia, assuming that we can figure out who the district attorney's sleeping with or not sleeping with or keeping cash in coffee cans or whatever she does with it. But, it's all coming due. And now the civil case on January 6th brought by the D.C. police officers can move forward.
And Biden's not without any problems. He was cleared of the one thing, but they're still working on Hunter a little bit, although that took a hit this week as well.
Apparently, the FBI charged the key witness with lying to the FBI. He was the basis of Jim Comer's case. And again, as we've said before, the House Republicans are really the gang that can't shoot straight when it comes to investigating Biden. So Biden will probably not have to face an impeachment or a serious impeachment effort. Hunter Biden still has, a court date for the charges brought against him by the Department of Justice. I think Joe Biden is going to probably escape most of it. There'll be some tawdry stuff on the edges.
Sure.
But again, the Republicans lacked the discipline to put together a case, and it looks like their key witness is going to be charged with perjury.
There we have kind of the legal. I think we've covered all the legal stuff, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about the politics. The border, because the Biden thing has sort of fallen apart, the GOP seems to be going back to the border issue a lot more. But they kind of ended up with a black eye this last week because they didn't accept a bill that they pretty much endorsed.
Well, that's right. And it was negotiated by Jim Lankford, one of the most conservative Republican members of the Senate. And it was because Trump intervened and said, don't solve the border issue. I want it as an issue in the campaign. Now, the dynamic of this, what happened is the Democrats finally realized that they're getting killed on the border issue.
Right.
It's surpassing the economy in terms of the number one issue in people's minds. Every day you've got pictures of people camping out in Eagle Pass, Texas. And you've got New York City going broke because they provide housing to homeless that gets bussed up there. The country collectively had enough. So Biden threw in the towel. He agreed to many of the Republican concessions that they'd asked for over the years on the border bill. Kristen Sinema, an independent, and Jim Lankford, a Republican conservative, and I think Coons, a Democrat, negotiated a reasonable bill that gave the Republicans most of what they wanted, and very little in terms of dreamers or any of the things that the Democrats had traditionally asked for. And then Trump came in and big-footed the deal. Because you only need 2 or 3 votes, his supporters in Congress kept the speaker from bringing the bill up. And so even though Republicans said, okay, we're not going to vote on Ukraine, we're not going to vote on Israel, we're not going to vote on Taiwan until you give us a border bill. Well, they gave them a border bill and they didn't want to vote on it. Right-wing media has got all whipped up and said, it's not a good bill, there's got to be a better bill. Right. Well, there's not a better bill when you've got a Democrat president, a Democrat Senate, and you've got a 3-vote majority in the House. So nothing happened. And nothing happened on Ukraine, nothing happened on Israel, nothing happened on Taiwan, nothing's happened on national defense. The country's just gone into sort of a gridlock. And I've already been into it with some Republican congressional candidates about what a mess this is. The last thing America is looking at and saying, we need more Republicans in Congress. If you're the majority party, you have a responsibility to get stuff done. And I pity poor Mike Johnson because he's got a caucus of crazies that are holding him hostage. I think in his heart of hearts, he knows what to do the right thing, but he's not able to do so. So here we go. It's, situation normal, all screwed up.
The case of the border, again, is almost like the abortion issue. Once the abortion issue was kind of settled and the GOP got everything what they wanted pretty much, the dog had caught the car. And then the dog didn't know what to do once it caught the car. So the border is kind of that same sort of situation. The dog had caught the car and they were ready to pull the car over. And then the GOP started the car up again.
Right. And based on polls, Republicans were going to just beat the hell out of the Democrats on immigration until this happened. Those that run a skillful campaign will have some cover on this issue and be able to bounce that ball in the other side of the court. And it will negate the advantage that Republicans had on this issue, which was a big issue going into the fall election.
Yeah, and it still is a big issue. And I think that they still have somewhat of an advantage. But this whole maneuvering probably tainted it a little. But they still have a big issue with the border, and there's no question about that. Okay. Now, you've done some research, I understand, on, well, lay it out for us, Keith. This is extremely interesting. This is kind of fun, actually.
I was at a lunch with a bunch of guys a week or so ago, and one of my Trump-supporting friends came up to me and said, there's no prohibition against running for office from jail. A guy in Washington, D.C. did it. And I said, that's interesting. And credit the Trump campaign because they have talking points on this issue.
Oh, man.
So I went and did some research, and a fellow by the name of Jose Caston was elected to the Advisory Neighborhood Committee in Washington, D.C., in Ward 7. He was serving a term. He was finishing a 26-year term in prison for murder. And he ran against three other guys who were also incarcerated and won. Apparently, the jail is a major population center in this particular ward. But he got elected. And they allowed him to do meetings via Zoom. It's apparently a federal prison, and they were going to transfer him because of overcrowding to Pennsylvania. And the ACLU intervened, allowing him to stay in the prison to finish his term on the Advisory Neighborhood Council. He's now out of jail because he finished his 26-year prison term for murder, and but did get elected. And so it started me thinking, well, has anybody else done this? And apparently, and it goes all the way back to 1798. Matthew Lyon from Massachusetts was elected to Congress, who was serving a term in jail for libeling John Adams, and yet got elected to Congress from his jail cell. And Donald Trump would not even be the first candidate to run for president from jail. The first was Eugene Debs in 1920, the famous communist socialist who was serving for espionage. He lost, and then after Warren Harding got elected in 1920. He pardoned Debs and let him out of prison. But we all, or at least those of us who are our age, remember Lyndon LaRouche. And right. Lyndon LaRouche was one of the great conspiracy candidates. He ran from jail in 1992, which would have been against Clinton. He was in jail for tax evasion. There was another guy who ran against Obama from a jail in West Virginia, but he was really, I think his campaign platform was more butter on the toast in the commissary.
Right.
But so... Trump would be the fourth candidate to run for president from jail. And again, I think we ought to give the campaign credit for having talking points and for gaming this issue out. Can't say that they're a secret switch.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing. It would be interesting to see how someone campaigns from jail, though. That would be a little trickier in this modern day. And back in those old days, it wouldn't have mattered. But today you need social media, you need TV, you need all of the stuff. So it'd be a little tougher to campaign from jail, I would think.
Well, you'd think so, but if Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson takes those collect phone calls for 3 minutes, he'll get his time on national news.
That's hilarious. It's a circus, my friend. It is a circus.
It is this year.
We're going to talk a little bit about Taylor Swift here in a second, but also you got to meet the other GOP candidate recently. Tell us about that experience.
Nikki Haley came through Orange County, and I was pleased to contribute and to help get some people out and to welcome her to Orange County. I am actually a Nikki Haley delegate. So if she gets 50% of the California vote, I will be going to the convention on her behalf. I'm not buying my ticket yet. But she's an outstanding candidate, by the way, in person, and I think it would make a wonderful president. It was so refreshing to, after all of the recent years of noise and candidates who are just bombastic and crazy, to hear somebody running for president who's normal, who has a vision for America, who can unite people, and who's talking about people's problems where they live and not his own problems. I was inspired to get involved, and I'm proud to do so. I think she is a great candidate, and it's unfortunate she's running in this environment with Donald Trump, but she's the last person standing between him and the nomination.
And it isn't completely out of the question.
No, I mean, as we've already said, Trump may win the primaries, but he's certainly losing the court cases.
Right.
And at the end of the day, despite the record of Mr. Caston here, I think it's going to be hard for him to run from jail.
Where's the convention if you get to go?
It's in Milwaukee.
You ready for that trip?
I've been to Milwaukee. It's actually a very pleasant city, but, we'll see.
But you're not packing your bags yet.
I'm not packing my bags yet. I haven't bought the ticket.
That's good. Now, the Taylor Swift factor.
Mike, let's give it to you because you were the guy back in our very first episode who said, maybe the secret weapon of Joe Biden is going to be Taylor Swift because she can motivate 50,000 people to register to vote. And by God, that has hit the news. The right-wing media has picked it up. They've found your idea. 20% of American voters believe the conspiracy that Taylor Swift is involved, along with Travis Kelce, in a secret plan to keep Joe Biden in the White House. But you were the guy who predicted it first, that Taylor Swift was going to be the Democratic secret weapon.
I would refer everybody back to the first few episodes because we covered it in 2 or 3 episodes. We talked about culture and how it affects politics and all. And we talked at length about the possibility that Taylor could be a factor. All you have to do kind of is look at the Super Bowl ratings. It was the largest television audience since the moonwalk. And I have to say it probably has to do with Taylor Swift. A lot of it has to do with Taylor Swift. So that right there kind of gives you an idea of what a force in pop culture she is.
Absolutely. And by millions, more women watch the Super Bowl than any other sporting event ever.
Well, and one side note that I find hilarious, and you can find a clip on YouTube somewhere, the only politician that Taylor Swift has name dropped as someone she didn't like was Marsha Blackburn, who is the senator in Tennessee, right?
Right.
There's a clip out there where from one of the right-wing media sources that they're interviewing Marsha Blackburn about various things, and they ask her about Taylor Swift and how she feels about being called Trump with a wig, which is what Taylor had called her. If you watch that clip, you can see a woman who is normally very outspoken against progressive people, a pit bull when it comes to progressive politics. She really walks the line carefully in talking about Taylor, what a wonderful entertainer she is, yada, 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 yada. She would not say anything negative about her. So that, to me, showed how scared people are of her. And you have pointed out that Trump has avoided it as well so far.
You're right. I mean, the Vivek Ramaswamys and the Waters guys, they picked it up and they tried to, beat that horse and make a story out of it. But the real people who know politics, Reince Priebus on ABC, his whole thing was, there's nothing to see here. We're not in a fight with Taylor Swift. This is such a football game. There's no politics, nothing to see here. Let's just move on. So people that really understand the potential of Taylor Swift getting involved in the campaign and what her influence can be are saying, we don't want any part of her.
Here's what I'd like to see from Taylor Swift. I'd like to see her say nothing, because that would drive the right even more crazy. Just tell her fans to register to vote and to vote and leave it at that. That is all she needs to do, I think.
Well, that's right. That's exactly right. And what would happen is there'll be all this talk about the October surprise of when is Biden going to drop the Taylor Swift bomb, and it'll drive the right wingers nuts.
Exactly. And the other thing is the right really has no one to blame for Taylor Swift than themselves, who supported, elected a celebrity game show host to the presidency. So when you start doing the shut up and sing stuff, it doesn't fly anymore. like it used
No,
to.
sure doesn't.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Keith. It's been great to be back. We're off and running now to November, and we want to thank everybody for tuning in to Red versus Blue. Please tell your friends, subscribe, like our Facebook page, and continue to support us because we're getting some good feedback, and we appreciate you supporting the show. We're having a great time doing it and hope you're enjoying listening to it. We'll see you again next week for another edition of Red versus Blue.
Bye, everybody.